Good evening and welcome to the special panel discussion regarding TC3 land. I'm joined by Roger Sutton, the Chief Executive of the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority, who will be tonight's moderator as we tackle the various TC3 topics that you, the viewer, have asked for more information about.
Oh, thanks, Kineta. And it's really good to be here with everyone who's watching on CTV or watching through the CERA website. TC3 for a lot of people has caused them a lot of sort of angst and heartache over the last few months. So we've tried to bring together tonight a panel of experts, people who can answer questions that we've had repeatedly at CERA and we've heard throughout the community about TC3 land. So with me tonight, introducing everybody, first of all we've got John McSweeney. John McSweeney is from Southern Response,
That's right.
the old AMI.
Yes.
Mike Gululi, who's from the Christchurch City Council.
Evening, Roger.
John Lucas, who's from the Insurance Council.
Evening, Roger.
The Insurance Council are the people that sort of represent all the major insurance companies in New Zealand. And then Malcolm McMillan, who's from the government department that looks after building issues, which is called the Ministry of Building, Innovation and Employment.
Good evening.
So I wonder if we should start with you, Malcolm, to begin with. And just sort of start at the very beginning, why actually have different land categories at all?
Very good question. I think it's important in terms of the initial context for all of this, for people to understand that we had a significant amount of damaged residential building stock and we had high variability in terms of the land across the Greater Christchurch region. And we've also got scarce engineering resource, so there's a limited number of geotech and structural engineers available to be here as part of the rebuild. So we took a triage approach at the front end really, and through area-wide assessments, that's through geotech investigations, through looking at the LiDAR results, that's the surveys of the land and whether it's dropped or risen, through looking at observed damage to both land and buildings, we were able to take an area-wide approach and slice up the Greater Christchurch area into 3 categories, technical categories 1, 2 and 3 no less. And that triage approach enabled us to free up effectively about 80% of our residential building stock, which sits inside TC1 and 2, and prescribe some technical solutions for those properties that have suffered foundation damage to crack on and work through their insurance processes and get those repairs and rebuilds underway. And it's enabled us to focus those scarce resource of geotech and structural engineers into the areas where they'll be most at the greatest value, and that's those properties that are TC3. And they're TC3 really because further investigation and assessment is necessary to determine just what are the specific ground conditions and then what are the right foundation solutions for those properties. Arguably we could have called them assessment categories because fundamentally this is all about what's the level of assessment necessary to determine what are the right foundations for those properties.
So it basically means if you're going to do something major to your house and you're on TC3 land, you just need to make sure you've got professionals overseeing that rebuild to a much greater extent than would happen in other parts of Christchurch.
That is absolutely correct, and I guess this isn't new for New Zealand. Every day geotech investigations are carried out on properties around the country, and engineers design foundations specific to those properties. So it's business as usual in much of the building and construction sector around New Zealand. It doesn't have the title of TC3 in other parts, but it's the same practice happening. And I guess too it's important for people to understand if we hadn't taken this approach and created technical categories, effectively we would have been treating everybody like a TC3 property and doing an awful lot of geotech investigations and engineered foundations for all of the properties across Christchurch where there's foundation damage, and that would take an awful long time and it simply wouldn't be necessary or appropriate for many of the properties.
So we've done a lot of public meetings across Christchurch over the last few months talking about these sorts of issues. And I often get stopped by people at these meetings worried that their land is so badly damaged they're worried that whether anyone can ever build them a foundation and then build a house on that's going to withstand future quakes. Is some of this land that's TC3, is it so badly damaged that we can't build new houses on it?
I think at a technical level the answer to that is no. It's green TC3 for a reason as opposed to red, and we've really gotten rid of most of the worst.
So you're clear that's pretty much everybody in TC3 that we can actually build them a new house on that land.
So at a technical level, there are engineering solutions to rebuild foundations on all types of TC3 land. We've got a range of different technical solutions, including those that have suffered a bit of lateral spread, which is one of the more challenging issues in TC3. But there are technical solutions for all of those properties and those situations. Acknowledging there will be some issues around the economics of those, but there are technical solutions.
Well, let's come back to the economics in a moment. But tell us about, so for most of these places, the engineer needs to see some drilling information. Tell us about that, Malcolm.
He does, yes. And so it's really about finding out what's underground, what are the ground characteristics, and then designing foundations to suit those characteristics. So they will need to kind of tap into some geotechnical engineering data or information. Now that might be a borehole drilled on that particular property, or it might have been some that have happened around the area recently, out on the footpath or across the back fence or 2 houses down the road. So the engineers make that call based on the science, and they access that geotech information, and then they determine what are the right foundations to suit that particular property.
So I mean, I think some people are worried that if I don't get a hole drilled on my place, how can they design a foundation for my place? How's that all going to work?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's that we let the science and the engineers drive this. But there are areas of Greater Christchurch that after geotech investigation after geotech investigation, they're coming across quite consistent ground. So there simply isn't a need to have to drill every property when you get a lot of consistent ground.
So what you're saying is if I live here, and someone lives here, and they'll both have their properties drilled, the engineers will say, I'm really happy to sign off this house because I've just got so much data from everyone around. And
consistent data. It's showing that across this area the ground is the same. So that gives them the confidence to make those decisions.
I've got to ask the question, with all this data that is being taken, where does the data go? Who can access it? And I mean, do the general public get to it?
Well, all that data is going into a big computer database, which is on the internet, which is really primarily accessible for engineers and other professionals who are going to be designing these houses. So it's a public database that engineers can see and work out what's actually going on there. And so there's this database which has got all this data in there, by property. And then what also is happening, there's a bunch of engineers in Wellington who are taking all that data and turning that into a map. So I think at the end of all this drilling program, whether it takes a year or 18 months, we're going to have a very, very detailed map of a lot of Christchurch, which people will have a lot of knowledge. So when they go off and build that foundation for your house, they'll know exactly what sort of foundation is actually needed. So Christchurch is going to end up being probably one of the best understood cities in the whole world with geotech data, because it's not just the drilling data from the insurance company that goes in there and from EQC, the people that are putting the electricity cables in the ground, any geotech information they get goes into this database, the people doing the roads. There's a lot of information going into that.
Now, Roger, you just touched on foundations before, and I guess that's something that John can answer. Who will be paying for upgrading the foundations?
I think it's important to appreciate that if you've got a full replacement type policy, which the vast majority of customers in Canterbury do have right throughout New Zealand, then your insurance company is going to be paying for that for you.
So if it's a really expensive foundation, John, the insurance company is going to have to pay for that, or you're going to have some sort of a negotiation with the customer?
Yes, there's no limit on what the dollar cost is for the suitable foundation for the sort of house and the sort of land you've got. But at some point there's going to be a consideration as to whether, at the moment, a very, very expensive foundation is really the best use of resources for your particular property. But if it is expensive, yes, it's worthwhile having a discussion with your insurer as to what alternatives there might be available. But that really just
leaves in some ways the household in quite a strong, to put it bluntly, quite a strong negotiating position with you. The more expensive the foundation, the better their position to negotiate with you is. Can I be cheeky like that, John?
There is a little bit of that, but a lot of people want to stay where they are.
Yep.
They've associated with that community and they want to stay there. And if the only option is a really expensive foundation just at the moment, that's most probably not going to be in the very early build queue that we're doing. It will be delayed because the engineers are working on more economic foundation solutions that will still provide the same level of protection.
The cost of the drilling? Some friends of mine in St Martin's the other day, they watched Southern Response drill down 20 metres. Who pays for all this drilling?
Again, with the full replacement type of policies that most people have in Canterbury, the insurance company pays for that. So the homeowner does not need to pay for the drilling, the insurance company will pay for that as part of the cost of replacing your home.
And the timeframes, because, you know, people are getting pretty sick of sitting around waiting, you know. Are the insurers starting to publish timeframes?
Most insurers have published timeframes. Now, there is a limit on the number of drill rigs that are available, but more importantly, there's a limit on the number of engineers that are able to analyse the data that's being drilled. Now, most drilling is expected to be completed during 2014. And even though houses won't be able to be built at that time, the drilling will be completed throughout that.
Well, there's going to be, that sounds like a lot of people will get done next year as well then.
Yes, there will be. There
Right.
will be. And EQC have a big resource of drilling at the moment. As they complete their program, then those rigs and the engineers will become
come through.
available.
Cool.
Yes. Yes.
All right, so we've had a good look at the background there to TC3. After the break, stay with us because we're going to look at TC3 processes. Welcome back to this live discussion on all things TC3. I'm with Roger Sutton. And Roger, we've heard the background to TC3. Do you think there is a general understanding in the community about the processes involved?
I think people are getting better informed, but I think there's a big variation in some people who understand an awful lot to some people who are still trying to get to grips with you know, the very basic things. And I guess that sort of allows me to sort of throw to you, Malcolm, in terms of, you know, you're the key government agency around this building stuff. What are you doing to try and get that information out there to professionals, mums and dads, all the people that want to understand this stuff?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and we've done and continue to do a lot of work around educating and informing people, both community groups and partnering with CERA around a lot of those public meetings, but also with some of the professionals, engineers, architects, building inspectors, project management officers.
So you're working hard at trying to talk to the engineers who work for the insurers who are sort of...
We do. We've got regular working groups with them, with our engineers who are designing the new standards, working with the engineers from insurance companies, make sure that they understand the stuff and how to apply it, and then also those in private practice and the engineers and designers and the inspectors that have to inspect the stuff. So working with these folk each and every day and week.
So I mean, I go to these meetings and often I get tackled by people who live next to a river, and they say, Roger, will I ever get a foundation next? You know, my house slid towards the river. Are there foundation solutions for those sorts of people?
There are, yep, and we've done an awful lot of work around gathering the experts domestically in terms of earthquake engineering, and then also getting our new standards and new guidance internationally peer reviewed by experts overseas to make sure that we've got the most robust standards possible and we can have the most resilient houses appropriate for Canterbury and the rebuild.
So John, I mean, you know, we've worked really hard at the engineering to try and make sure these new houses, you know, are going to work. How is it getting insurance now on this TC3 land? Because in some way that's a test about whether we've done a good job or not.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
No, it's a good question too, Roger. Well, quite simply, the insurers are still providing cover for the existing customers in TC3, and that's important to understand that. They're providing cover for those customers who are currently living in damaged homes. They're providing cover for those customers who are going into the rebuild, and they're going to be providing cover for those people that come out of the rebuild for a period of time, probably continually, as permanent cover. So that's important to understand.
So John, so if you lived in a TC3 house and I go and buy it off you, am I going to get cover for that?
Well, that's an area where the insurers will want to know a lot about the house. If they hadn't been insuring it before, they hadn't been involved in the rebuild.
Or what about just picking up the old policy that you might have had? That's what I mean.
That's possible.
Okay.
Yes, it is. And that's something you should talk to your insurer about.
Okay.
Or the insurer for the house that's been sold. So talk to them about that.
So the council's got a big role to play here, Mike.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, what are you doing around, have you consented any houses on TC3 land?
Yeah, we've seen a steady increase in the number of consents we're approving in the TC3 zone, so we're getting more applications in at a steady rate. And we can't categorically say why that is so. possibly because John insurance solutions are being found, but building on what Malcolm was saying earlier, we're getting a sense that
So how many consents have you done? Have you done 10, 20?
over the last 3 months, 155 consents approved in TC3. That's residential consents. We've done 14 commercial consents, so they're coming through. But we're getting a sense that the collaboration that's required between the geotechnical engineer and the structural engineer and the architect, those solutions are starting to come through, and we think that's the reason why we're seeing.
So you guys, I think a lot of people are worried that you guys would take a long time to consent one of these TC3 houses. What we're hearing is that you're getting your act together.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
That's fair. Look, we're absolutely committed to helping our customers get the go-ahead for all their consents, whether it's a building consent or a resource consent. Currently, we're processing 96% of our applications within 20 working days. That's building consent applications. 99% of our resource consent applications are done within statutory timeframes. We're achieving that without a significant increase in resources. It's by being slicker, looking at our key processes and just doing it better. So
if I'm on a TC3 house, is that something which goes on the limb? How does that all work?
Yeah, no, we're not putting technical categories on limbs. And maybe if we just step back a bit and talk about limbs. Limbs are land information memorandums. It's a report that council has on each property that holds all the information that we know about that property. One of the boxes you've got to tick when you buy a house is get a limb. We don't tell you whether or not you're technical category 1, 2 or 3. We say that you are subject to a CERA land zone classification, and we direct our customers where to go to get that information.
So if I'm going to buy a house in the future and I go get a limb, I mean, what sort of advice would you give to someone buying a house on that sort of TC3 on TC3 land?
What sort of advice would we give them about?
Or you personally, in some ways, if you put that hat on.
Yeah. Look, if you're doing something on TC3 land, you need a consent. Come to us early. Yep. And building on what Malcolm was saying earlier, get expert advice. You really have to engage with your professionals. Do as much as you can to inform yourself about the recent Building Act changes. They do affect you, and there's plenty of great information on the CERA website, the Ministry's website, to help you do that.
So if I for the sort of stuff, so if I build a beautiful, strong house on TC3 land.
Yep.
How is that information? Is that on the limb? Can I see that I've got a super? How does that work? How's the buyer of the house reassured about the repairs that were done on that property?
Look, categorically, absolutely, if you've got a house that has been consented and gone all the way through the consenting process, it is going to be absolutely safe. And if you've done that, there's an absolute commitment to safety, because that's what the Building Code and the Building Act does. It's a real commitment to safety.
What about? I mean, I guess one of the real tests in all this is for someone who's got an undamaged house on TC3 land.
Yep.
Some people worry about what that really means. And I guess I was going to be quite gutsy here and throw it to you, Malcolm, as being quite the guy who knows the building guy. Your daughter's moved back to Christchurch and she's fallen in love with a house on TC3 land on the South Shore. Would you let her buy that house? Would you put money into that house yourself? It's got almost no damage. It's been through all these quakes. It's got almost no damage. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I guess the advice I'd give my daughter, or anyone for that matter, is undertake the due diligence, get a good lawyer, do the investigations, get a limb report, have it inspected by a surveyor or an engineer, and make sure you've got a good buy. If it hasn't got damage and it's in a TC3 classified property, that's a pretty good sign around how resilient that house is and how it's performed, and also a pretty good sign around the land it's sitting on and the quality of that land. So homeowners in that house or in TC3 classified properties in that situation, or people looking to buy houses in that situation, should take great comfort in terms of the state of that house, and that it's gone through sort of 11,500, 12,000 earthquakes and has performed very well. I would require a long settlement for my daughter because she's only 4, but apart from that.
But I guess it's kind of the crunch point. You're all big professionals around this. How comfortable would you guys be buying that undamaged house on TC3 land?
Oh, absolutely. The technical categories mean that a house can be built there.
And I guess I'm also just trying to hint away at this thing. We have theoretical calculation about what the land's going to do, what the house is going to do. These houses that have performed so well, it's not theory. They've been through it.
That's
and
right.
I guess that's really the ultimate test.
That's
All
right.
right. Actually, stay with us because after the break we're going to come to John and we're going to talk to him about reports from the insurance companies. Welcome back to this live discussion on all things TC3. Now, before the break, I stopped John from having a good chat about insurance things. Roger?
Well, I was just asking you, John, would you buy one of those undamaged TC3 houses? I was trying to go there as well.
Yes, I would. Particularly as Malcolm said before, if a house has come through those number of earthquakes that we've had in Christchurch and it's still good and undamaged, the land is okay and it's a well-constructed, strong house. And we just do need to remember that TC3 means that if you're going to build a new house, you've got to do analysis to identify the sort of foundations that you need. That's all it is.
So that's good, John. What about, I meet people who are just frustrated with how things are going, and they want to see their file. They want to see what the insurance company's collected on their property. How do I get hold of that information? You've done your investigations and all that. How do I get hold of that? Am I entitled to it?
You are absolutely entitled to it. You're entitled to it directly under the right of the Privacy Act. Now, most insurers, though, when they let you know the extent of damage that your house has suffered and what the costs of that repair or their estimated replacement cost is going to be, they'll tell you that figure so that you know what it is in round figures.
So if I want to challenge that number and go off and get my own quantity surveyor or builder, they've got something to start from then, John?
They've got something to start from, but there are some people that do want a little bit more and want to see everything that the insurance company has about them, and you're entitled to request that. Just as an example, for our own company, we've made offers and had nearly 4,000 people accept their offer. We've had approximately 70 requests for the full detailed analysis of the reports that we've provided. So most people are finding that the information that is being provided to them is sufficient.
John, John Lucas, talk a bit about the timeframes. Some people are going to wait. One set people talk about 8 years, but no one's talking about 8 years any longer to get their houses fixed, are they? No,
I don't think 8 years is going to be a problem. Certainly 3 to 4 years is what the insurers' build programs are going to look like. So expect that's the sort of period for most of the rebuilds to take place.
How many houses is that roughly, John?
That's 20,000 houses that are going to be managed by insurers, which are going to be fairly extensive repairs or complete rebuilds.
So I guess, we were trying to do some numbers the other day. So 20,000, 3 or 4 years, that works out at 6,000 or 7,000 houses a year. How does that, I guess we used to build about 3,000 houses a year in Christchurch. So I guess, Yeah,
that fits in with our sort of program of building up to 2,000 houses a year is the program to and plus some major repairs as well.
So you've got about a 30% market share, haven't you?
We
so
do.
You're going to be 2,000. That's sort of like 6,000. That's doubling, tripling probably the rate which we're building houses in Canterbury.
Could be as high as 8 in an annual period, quite easily.
What about? There's moving around the community, you meet people in different sort of situations. From people who are, I met someone the other day who's got their $100,000 from EQC and they're pretty happy. They've paid off their mortgage. But other people are finding life very difficult. Elderly people, people who can't live in their houses. Prioritisation?
That's right, Roger. The industry, the insurers and EQC as well are working quite hard to prioritise the elderly people and vulnerable people, people that have young children, solo mums, people which are finding life in general quite hard at the moment. There is a move to get those people back into their repaired homes fairly quickly and move them to fairly urgency up the queue to move those people ahead.
You're working through those sort of processes, John McSweeney?
We do, and all insurers do have a priority, what's called plight, for those sort of serious issues. But I think we must also remember that this means that your new house could possibly be built within 12 months rather than within 4 years. So it's not an immediate fix, but definitely there is a program.
Why does it take so long, John? What, well, I mean, I want a new house, you can build it tomorrow. What's the problem?
For most people that suddenly find they're in a position where they have to build a new house, there's a design process that they want to go through, because very few people just have exactly the same house that they had originally. They want to make some changes and see the latest innovations and that sort of thing, and just take a little bit of time to work through those new plans and their colour schemes and that sort of thing. And then, although we've heard from the council it doesn't take very long, but there is a process that you've got to go through for the consent and get the plans drawn up and get the builder engaged.
Choose the bathroom taps and choose the door handles and all those other things that I couldn't stand doing, but I guess for a lot of people it's going to be really cathartic and,
Yes, it will be. And that's why also for a number of insurance companies there is the option that some customers have chosen, which is to just simply buy another house or buy a house and land package where that's already done for them, so they can just move in fairly quickly.
So you guys are willing to talk to people about those sorts of options, just saying, if you like, take the cash and move on?
Not so much take the cash, but insurance policies, or most insurance policies, have options other than building a new house on your existing site. But particularly buy another house, taking that money and buying another house, preferably in Canterbury, but wherever you wish to in New Zealand, or building somewhere else other than the existing site that you were on.
John, I've got to ask a question. The feedback from the public, are they happy with this response from the insurance companies?
The options that have got, well, I think in general they are. We've got, for our own company, 28% of our customers have made a decision and have moved on. They've made a decision and it's been implemented. So I think that's a really good indication that they've been able to get a settlement in their own personal circumstances.
Okay. And should we ask John Lucas, what exactly will residents be offered if EQC deems a land uneconomic to build on?
Well, first of all, we do need some clarity on how EQC will settle those land claims where the land may be uneconomical to build on. But generally what would happen, the insurer would then rebuild the house on a new site. If you have a replacement policy, a lot of policies allow for rebuilding on a new site. If that's not possible, then there may be a cash out provision with the insurance company.
I guess in those cases it's going to also be, if it's uneconomic to rebuild, you're going to expect some sort of proper payout from EQC as well, and they're working through those issues at the moment.
That's correct.
But we also, I guess, Malcolm, we think there's going to be very few cases like that, aren't we?
I think it's important to remember that the worst land is in the red zone. So TC3 is green for a reason.
Okay.
All right, stay with us, because after the break, a viewer question about accommodation. Welcome back to our special live TC3 discussion panel, and I'm here with Roger Sutton from CERA. Now, Roger, we have a viewer question. Many TC3 homes are already getting repaired or rebuilt. So what financial support are these people entitled to when they move out?
So some people are moving out of their houses because they're getting repairs done. And some people are moving out of their houses because their houses actually just aren't habitable any longer. So in general, your insurance company is going to pay for a period of 6 months or a year for you to get accommodation support from your insurance company. And that's how long it takes a lot of houses to get rebuilt. But for some people, they want to move out because their houses are just dreadful and they want to stay out until their new house is built, and that may be quite a long period of time. So the government's got a program of paying accommodation support, and that is up to $330 a week. That's not means tested, it's whatever your financial situation is, that's what you're entitled to. If you own the house, you have to move out because you don't have, you can't live there any longer. And that program has been ticked off to last until March 2015. So that's actually quite a long way out. So for a lot of people, that will allow them to move out of their house.
Okay. Now it's Mike's turn for some questions about new flood risk areas. Roger, do you want to?
Yeah, Mike, so, there was a lot of concern after the earthquakes, and I know as we're doing the red zone stuff, flooding was an issue we had in the back of our mind. You know, some parts of Christchurch have got more flood risk now. Tell us a bit more. I mean, how much worse is the flood risk than it was?
Yeah, look, we've been doing a lot of work in that area, and we were doing a lot of work before the earthquakes. Maybe there's two parts to this question. But if we just step back a bit and maybe talk about what's happened to the land, we know that over extensive areas of Christchurch, the land has gone down around 200 to 300 millimetres. Adjacent to some of our more damaged waterways, you know, like Dudley Creek, we've seen land damage or land settlement around 400 to 500 millimetres. Horseshoe Lake on the Avon, you know, the land damage is around a metre. So,
although a lot of those areas around Horseshoe Lake, that also went red as well.
And that has gone red for a very good reason. Yeah, that will be one of the drivers. But prior to the earthquakes, the council had identified those flood-prone areas that were vulnerable to extreme rainfall and tidal events, and created the flood management area boundaries. Those areas were also susceptible to climate change and sea level rise. So that's kind of why we had flood management areas before the earthquakes. And those were in the lower parts of the Avon, the Heathcote, the Styx, also in the urban areas of our coastal urban areas like Sumner, Redcliffe and South Shore. If anybody wants to know where they are, they can jump on our website and tap in flood management areas, and they'll get a sense of where, or they'll find out where they are. Also, they can get a limb, and then that'll be on their limb. But what that means for people is that if you are in a flood management area, you need to get a resource consent, and that will set a floor level, an appropriate floor level for your property.
So, I mean, I heard the number. Someone said there's something like 10,000 properties are in one of these flood management areas. But of those 10,000 properties, or whatever that precise number is, the majority, as I understand, have got the level of flooding they were going to get, and even a 200-year flood is actually pretty small.
Yeah, let's talk about the numbers. Prior to the earthquake, in the 50-year flood event, we talk about the 50-year event in Christchurch because that's the building code requirement to keep surface water out of your house. Prior to the earthquakes, we had around 9,500 properties that were vulnerable to some form of inundation, to some sort of flooding. After the earthquakes, that number's gone up to 10,300. Now, that's not a dramatic increase. It's of the order of about 760 properties. But there's been, when you look at the numbers a bit closer, there's 2,500 roughly houses that are now have flooding that didn't have flooding before. But interestingly, there's 1,800 properties that don't. And there's a really good reason for that when you see the way that the land is actually settled. And that gives us a net increase of only around 769. Now, the flooding in Christchurch, we are low-lying. We were prone to flooding before the earthquakes, and we still have that same sort of risk profile. And the flooding tends to be shallow and inconvenient rather than flooding that is a real risk to life or property.
So what you're saying is because we're flat, when it floods, if it rains this much more, you know, get this much rain, the most flooding we get is this much. It's not like we live in a valley when it rains up the valley and the water comes rushing down and washes us all away.
No, there is no tidal wave rushing down the rivers going to inundate properties. The flooding, as I said, it'll be shallow, it'll be inconvenient. Most of the flooding, the majority of flooding is less than 400 mils and around 200 to 300. And
most people's floor levels are more than 200 or 300.
Look, absolutely. Our job, one thing we're really good at, in fact, most councils I say are pretty good at in New Zealand, is actually core business is to set floor levels to keep people's houses safe.
So I'm getting, so if I've got, badly damaged house, TC3 land, the land has dropped, I've got some more flood risk, and I'm getting a new house, is the insurance company going to build me a house which is at the same level before, or are they going to build me something higher to give me extra margin out of that water?
No, if you are, and so I might do a plug in now for our website, where you can actually go onto our website, www.ccc.govt.nz, type in floor levels, and you can actually see what your indicative floor level will be and what the average ground level will be, so you can get a sense of where things might be for your property. If you come in and your property has got some sort of flood risk, you'll have a floor level set, absolutely.
So what about a bit of some minor repair? All they're doing is fixing a bit of jib. And I've got some more flood risk. What happens then? Yeah,
look, if your repair, and we've got to be careful here because there's a lot of scenarios, but if your repair is non-structural and not for a major alteration, you won't be required to have a new floor level set.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you seeing how much community concern is there out there about that, Mike? And what are you doing about the flood risks?
Well,
communicating this stuff.
Well, we're doing a lot about flood risk. Probably what is really noticeable for people in the eastern suburbs is the extension of our stop banks in terms of they extend further up the river now than what they did before. They're actually also higher, and we've got a comprehensive sort of maintenance and monitoring program around those. We've also got a land drainage recovery program in place, which is looking at all our river and tidal flood protection needs. We're also looking at what's required to rehabilitate all our upstream rivers like Dudley Creek, Wairarapa, Waiiti streams, Nottingham Stream, and you name it, we'll be looking at it.
So, and in terms of I'm going to get a house that's going to be higher than it was before, the insurance company pays for that?
Yes, they do. Again, if you've got a full replacement policy and you're...
There's a cost to the insurer?
It's a cost to the insurer, not to the homeowner, yes.
The insurers, Roger, meet the costs associated with complying with any new regulations subject to the footprint of the policy and the property itself.
Just changing tack a bit here. The whole option of, if I did want to take, I want to take the money instead of a new house. What sort of situations would you advise someone to do that, John?
We'd be very hesitant about recommending that somebody take the money. The insurance policies are designed to get you a replacement house.
Get you back into what you were in before.
And even better, because you get a new house. You might have had a 20 or 30-year-old house or a 50-year-old house. You get a new house. Alternatively, you can buy another property that might be around about the same sort of age that you had before, or you can build somewhere else. So that's the way the policies are designed to work.
What about if I I used to have 7 children, now I don't have any children, I want to build a slightly smaller house. Is there an option to have a slightly smaller house and take some money and do something with it, to do something else with that money, John?
It's a very interesting question. Now, under the contracts, most contracts, insurance contracts that are in place, that's not an option. But some companies are looking at, our owners looking at whether we could provide that sort of option for a customer. We're looking at developing a policy around that because there would have to be some limits on it. But we're looking to see if we can provide that to our customers.
Roger, I've got to ask, is a cash settlement a bit risky? I mean, should people be even considering that?
Well, it's good to hear John saying, the insurance industry, aren't necessarily going to push that, because I think if I was going to take a cash settlement, I'd want to be really careful that I knew what I was going to do with that money. So, if, I got $400,000 from my insurance company thinking I was going to build a house with that $400,000, I'd want to make sure I had a very, very solid contract with a builder to build me a house for that $400,000. The thing is, if you leave your insurance company to build the house, they take the risk of prices going up, things going wrong, they take all that sort of risk. So if you're going to take a cash settlement, I'd be really careful that you've got a very, very solid plan of what you're going to do with that money, and you want to have someone who really knows what they're doing, wants to be holding your hand at that time.
Okay, stay with us. After the break, we're going to talk about disputes processes. Welcome back to our special live TC3 discussion panel. Roger, I have a question for you. Are houses selling in TC3 land?
So we've been talking to the Real Estate Institute about this today, and the numbers they gave us was between January and September, something like 11% of houses in Christchurch sold that were TC3. In the past 2 months, that number's increased to 13% in October and nearly 17% in November, which is pretty much the same proportion of houses that are TC3 and are selling in that area. So TC3 houses are selling just like everything else around Christchurch at the moment, which is great. And we're working hard, talking to the real estate agents, bankers, valuers about all these TC3 issues. We want those professionals to be reassured. As we're trying to work with the wider community as well. Okay.
As promised before the break, we're going to now look at the dispute processes. Roger, do you want to lead that?
Well, yeah. I don't like what you've done, John. I think the offer you've made me is awful. How's this dispute process run? If I think what you're doing is you're trying to rip me off. Sorry, John, to be so blunt.
It's all right. No, the first thing you do as a customer is you come and talk to your insurance company and ask to go through the process and how the offer was arrived at. Now, if it's a replacement house, generally it's not such a problem because you're getting a new replacement house. But there often are issues around the amount of money that's going to be allocated, particularly if you want to change some elements of design. If you can't get that resolved at the sort of first level of discussion, then all insurance companies are required and do have under the Fair Insurance Code a dispute process where a different group of people within that insurance company will have a look at all the issues and will come to a decision. More information might be needed. And once that decision is made, if you're still unhappy with it and are still not satisfied with it, then the insurance company will issue to you what is called a deadlock letter. And that deadlock letter entitles you to approach the Insurance and Savings Ombudsman, which is a free and independent service.
And they will hear your dispute.
The Insurance and Savings Ombudsman will hear your dispute and make a ruling.
And they're an independent organisation? John, have you had experience of them?
Absolutely, Roger. They are independent. They were set up by the insurance industry some 16, 17 years ago, and they are purely there to resolve disputes between a deadlock between the customer and the insurer.
And I guess there's always the courts as well?
There's the courts, yes, but remember the Ombudsman is free. The courts could cost you, but the Ombudsman is free.
Yeah,
On the courts, Roger, in Christchurch there's a special earthquake list has been established to hear earthquake-related disputes that go through the court system.
So if you do want to go to court, they're going to sort of fast-track it, aren't they?
Certainly that's what's happening, yes, but you do have to pay for that.
Okay, so it's been fast-tracked rather than it being a long, protracted route to take at the moment?
Yeah, I ran into a judge the other day at the airport, and he was telling me they've got this special list and they're saying anything which is earthquake-related, we're actually putting it through ahead of other disputes. So I think it's good to see sort of the wider community coming here to try and solve some of these issues, because for a lot of people it's a very difficult, emotional time.
Okay.
John, can I just go back to you, Malcolm? So these TC3 foundations, what are they designed to do? I mean, are they going to? How conservative have these engineers been in the design of these foundations? How thoughtful have they really been?
Well, engineers are always conservative, and that's probably not a bad thing, but I guess the whole objective here is about creating more resilient buildings in future. Can we give guarantees that if there's another future significant earthquake we won't face a bit of damage? No, we can't. But it's about designing buildings that won't break up and fall apart like the current stock has done. It's about reducing the numbers of houses that will end up being rebuilds, and it's about having houses that are resilient so that there's minor damage, things can be easily repaired, and people can get back into those houses and they're livable and very quickly after any significant earthquake. So it's about robust foundations and more resilient homes in future.
Yeah, I guess the other thing people have talked about is trying to build a foundation that those insurers, those conservative insurers, those insurers that in New Zealand, but also the reinsurers, will look at and go, gee, this is actually a properly engineered thing. I'm happy to carry on, insuring this property, even though I know it's maybe going to be subject to lateral spread or liquefaction or whatever. And
that's been part of our work, is to have those conversations both with the domestic and international insurers and reinsurers, and give them the confidence that this is about, it's a good risk profile, that this is a robust and more resilient building going forward, so that it looks attractive for insurers to continue to insure those properties.
Well, I guess part of this whole thing has been, the council is going to oversee these new foundations, and I guess the council building inspector's always been your friend. But I guess here they really are your friend, aren't they? Because they're really the guy that's going to have to put their name on a form saying they've looked at this design and it's going to work.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, I think what you're probably asking is, will these new foundations meet our consenting requirements? I mean, absolutely they will, provided they comply with the code, and that's the key thing. You have to comply with the building code. The thing about consenting requirements is, really engaging with the guidance information that is out there on the Ministry's website, getting good advice from professionals and putting in complete applications that allow these to be processed really, really quickly. So yes, absolutely they'll meet our requirements, and a lot of our requirements are more about the quality of the information.
Right.
And can I just say that to ensure that we get signed off consents as quickly as possible. The Ministry's issued a lot of technical guidance, a lot of solutions to help with the efficiency of the overall rebuild, so that engineers don't have to start from scratch and design a new foundation each and every time. They can look at our guidance and take that information and some of our solutions, and that gives the council confidence that they do meet the code. It gives the engineering professions confidence, and we can help with some of the efficiencies of the overall rebuild.
Yeah, look, and starting your dialogue with the council early will help speed up all the processes as well.
So just getting back to some of those basic sort of questions though, you know, if I've got a really badly damaged house on TC3 land and I've got a replacement policy, who pays for the house? Who pays for that fancy foundation?
It's your insurance company that will pay for that.
And who is going to pay for the drilling?
Again, your insurance company will pay for
So
that.
even if they have to drill down 20 or 30 metres, your insurance company is going to be paying for it.
Yes.
And I guess I want to go back to this fundamental question for us all. You know, your daughter or your sister, especially your difficult sister, wants to go off and buy a house on TC3 land, and she wants you to lend her some money for that. You know, are you guys up for it?
Definitely.
Mike?
Absolutely.
Why not? Why not? Certainly.
Look, you should take real comfort from how that house has performed over these last 11,500, 12,000 earthquakes. That's a real big sign around how resilient that house is.
I mean, do you think over time these you know, we talk a lot about how expensive these foundations are going to be. Are we seeing the cost of those foundations coming down?
We
Malcolm?
are, and there's a lot of work happening, and as John mentioned, you know, as people get more experience with these, we'll see new and innovative solutions coming on board. As there's competition in the market in terms of companies building these things, that'll bring the price down. So new and innovative designs and a bit of competition in terms of the workforce that they're building these things will help to reduce the cost of these over time.
I mean, a lot of these foundation solutions have also been around for a long time, haven't they? Some of these sort of deep pile foundations, they've been tried and true in a lot of places, haven't they?
Absolutely. So some of this isn't new. Deep pile foundations have been around for a long time and proven themselves.
Did some of these houses, so I just got a question I haven't asked, some of these houses performed so well, some of these undamaged houses on TC3 land, I guess some of them already had some of these fancy foundations.
Well, often about those better performing TC3 properties, it's been about the land that they're sitting on. It's been better than some other land, so it's been around the land, but primarily underneath it.
All right, I'd like to thank you, Roger, and our panel for tonight. Malcolm McMillan, John McSweeney, John Lucas and Mike Galuli. We hope this has been helpful for you, and indeed if you'd like to watch any of this, you can do so on the CERA website, cera.govt.nz. That will be up there from tomorrow. Thanks so much for watching. You can contact CERA, info@cera.govt.nz.